So hi, everyone. Welcome to our third Leading Thoughts presentation on the theme of freedom. I'm Laura Scappaticci, the Director of Programs for the Anthroposophical Society, and I'm joined here by my colleagues and by all of our wonderful friends that have joined this program, and by Lakshmi Prasanna, Patrick Kennedy, and Lisa Romero. They're our speakers tonight. Before I introduce you to them and we get started, I'm just going to light a candle. And so if you have a candle with you, go ahead and please light that. And if you don't, just light one inside yourself. So I'm really excited to have Lisa Romero, who you've hopefully met last time when we talked about freedom, and Patrick Kennedy, our first speaker for our Leading Thoughts in the program, and Lakshmi Prasanna, who is new with us tonight and is speaking on the theme of love next time we meet as a group to discuss the Leading Thoughts for Applied Anthroposophy. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Lakshmi, as you've met Lisa and Patrick before, and just say that I had the pleasure of interviewing Lakshmi for the podcast through the Anthroposophical Society called the Anthroposopher. And while I was sitting on this couch in Northern California with her, where she was leading a class on a book sometimes called The Study of Man, and I saw the way that she was teaching it, it was incredible, the detail and the deep dive and the exploration she was doing with the students. But what amazed me during the podcast was this absolute gesture of service that comes right through you, Lakshmi. So I'm so happy you're with us tonight. And I thought just a little bit of your background. You have a background, you're a doctor, a medical doctor, a physician, a pediatrician, specifically a neonatologist for over 25 years, and that you've worked with child development. You were the head of the Department of Child Development at a hospital in India. And also you've been working specifically, and where I think you're seated tonight, as a doctor at a Steiner School or Waldorf School in Australia, as the school doctor there, which was one of the models that Waldorf schools had. There was always a school doctor available to the students and the families there. And you're also the president of the Anthroposophical Medical Society in India. So we're just so glad to have your warmth and presence here with us tonight. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a presidential debate happening tonight in the United States. So if you're joining us from the US, that's one of the current events that's happening for us right now. And I believe our Chrysalis groups will be meeting at some point right after the election happens. So that's a big thing that's happening in the US right now. So I think I'm just going to turn it over to Lisa first, and then Patrick and Lakshmi, and they'll each have about 15 to 20 minutes to talk about this theme of freedom. And they have some of the questions that all of you have submitted, and they'll be working with those questions, and we'll have time for questions afterwards too. So if I've missed anything, Tess, or anyone, please let me know. How are we doing?
I think we're all good. Yeah, I just popped in 2 podcasts into the chat that you can visit another time. They'll be posted on the Padlet as well. So we will have a bulletin board for each and every theme. So I'm just putting that in the chat now. So that's a place where you can get all the resources from each theme that we go through. So those will be posted there as well. So yeah,
So we'll turn it to Lisa. Yeah. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. So it was good to receive some of the questions and to recognize that the questions that were being asked is actually where I was in a way headed. That's always a nice sense of a connection that builds, even though we seem miles apart. And one of those questions arose out of this statement that I brought last time, that we are free to the degree that the truth and realities of the spiritual world have access to our inner selves. And someone asked the question, well, what about if you're thinking consistently untruthful thoughts? And that's a very interesting question to kind of work with in terms of the inner development path. We know this theme that we're working with, which is freedom, is such an immense theme that it's not something that we were going to cover all the angles of. But because of the work that I do and the books that I've written, it seems appropriate that I really enter in from this angle of inner development. So in meeting that question out of that angle, I want to speak a little bit about what that means and then take that into the second question that I was asked, which is really about this question of how we support the liberation of others when none but ourselves can work on our own liberation in that sense. So just to begin that picture of self-liberation and this freedom that we can gain, most of us know that once we begin this journey of inner development, we're confronted really not by the freedom that's there, but by the unfreedom that lives in us. We're kind of sometimes daunted by the amounts of forces that compel us and call us and are conditioned and indoctrinated and working in our inner life. And that understanding is very important, to recognize that once I, in a way, start to awaken this spiritual flame, I'm more and more aware of this shadow or other limiting force that becomes, in a way, more clarified. Now, given the human nature, it's often common that people become distracted, or not distracted, but perhaps over-focused on those forces of unfreedom as they work towards gaining a greater sense of their spiritual connectedness. So when the truth or the realities of the spiritual world are able to awaken in us, even if it's for moments, then they are no longer just concepts, but actually are living experiences. And in that moment, we have this clarity of the potential for liberation, if not the liberation within that moment that it's occurring. But what if the human being is really encountering all the parts of themselves that are not free? And so we can take that. If somebody's, for instance, focusing on a thought like I'm of no value, not me personally, but every one of us, it's a very common thing to feel at times I've got no value or I'm worthless. That thought can begin to become a feeling, which becomes, in a sense, a different level of which we have to battle with that. Now, the thought itself, if we took it from an eternal or spiritual perspective, has an error about it, that the human being is worthless, and yet, or the human being has no value. Yet that thought or that feeling can actually go from this kind of internal argument of a feeling content into this, what we might feel is like a stronghold of belief, where we begin to act as though that's the truth. Now that builds into this, what we've named as this double, or this sometimes called the twin likeness, this aspect of our consciousness that actually requires transformation. And this awakening to liberation brings us to a greater and greater awareness of that. And I'm always hopeful, actually, when somebody says, I see all the limitations in me, because I immediately know there's something that's not that is able to perceive it. And so we get caught in the great limitation, but it's only revealed because the flame is growing. And so it's not to get caught up in this, but recognize, okay, this is part of where the work lies. And only we can do that for ourselves. And as we penetrate into our inner life, we may find that there are conditions or content that has been passed on through our family life or passed on through our culture or through the events of our biography that actually need to be really sorted, because they limit our capacity to give our inner life access to the truth and realities of the spiritual world. Now, working on ourselves that way is really something, as I said before, we can't do that for another person. Someone else's double shadow is theirs to work with. And we become more aware of the importance of, in a way, not trying to do that for another, when we realize that the strength that is gained through taking hold of that challenge out of myself. If you can imagine that you turn some of these errors into new, living, supportive ways of thinking, feeling, and being, it changes something in you, the fact that you're able to make that adjustment out of yourself. And that strength builds a resilience that can not only withstand some of the deeper challenges that we face within ourselves, but also the challenges that we face within the world. So we really wouldn't want to take that opportunity to build that strength away from someone else. But at the same time, what is our relationship to the liberation of the other? Now, again, I'm going to say this again because I'm sure people are going to have very different points of view on this. This is from an inner development perspective, and only one aspect of that, of course. But taking hold of this picture, we can actually inquire into this reality that Stana speaks about, that not only do we have this kind of individual double that needs to be transformed, but there is this community or collective double. And this collective other that needs to be transformed presents itself in three very significant ways when it submerges, not submerges, but when it's kind of works into the world that surrounds us all. And these three ways it presents itself is to present itself as a power or a negative power of doubt, a negative power of hatred, and a negative power of fear. Now, when we think about those three activities, those three powers, doubt, hatred, and fear, we would say that at this time, this double, this community double, is raising strongly in the world. And it's not, of course, necessarily in every community, but it's certainly in many countries, many communities. And in a certain way, we almost could say that it's grasping humanity as a collective together in a way that we've perhaps never seen it before with this pandemic. But with it, it has this possibility of really affecting each individual's capacity to work on their own liberation. Because I get so swamped with doubt, so in a way grabbed by fear, or this loathing or hatred for what is not agreeable to me, that I actually start being affected in my inner task about something that actually is affecting me from doing the work I need to do. And this is where we can really work with the other's liberation, because each one of us, when we meet each other, when we connect with each other, we can be contributing to the doubt and hatred and fear that is actually a collective double, or we can be really working consciously to not let that be the central force that is overshadowing this momentous moment for us all to take a leap, actually. A leap or a real decisive decision about what is the trajectory we want the world to head in towards. What is actually my next step? I often say to people, one of the most important things for our path of inner development is to recognize the schooling that you're in right now, and what is the step that's most useful for you to be working on. We can tell that because of the life that's around us, the book of your own life, and Krishnamurti spoke about this so well. This is the best book you're ever going to read in terms of reflecting back to you exactly what you need to be working on right now. But when we are inundated with doubt and hatred and fear, we actually can lose sight of the work that individually we can do to contribute towards the progression of, or the evolution of humanity. And we get actually overwhelmed by this collective shadow or the collective double. So we can't liberate the other, but we can contribute to the atmosphere of which allows the best possibility for the other to actually work on their own liberation. So these forces, doubt, hatred, and fear, are very strong they've been so strong and building for the last few years. They have many effects on the human soul life. They have huge effects on our community, on our children. But one of the things they do for your inner life is they stop you taking hold of what's really being asked of you right now. And that's completely individual to all of us. What is being asked of each of us right now is really the work that we can be doing to contribute to the growth and development of ourselves and how that relates to the world around us. Steiner gave this interesting picture of inner development. He said one half of inner development is the work you do on yourself. The other half of your development is the work that you do within the world around you, where you apply that to the life of someone else. Whether that be in the task that you do, or even in the short conversation that you might have with somebody. And that task of applying that to someone else really stands in this, right on that edge of, am I alive in my own inner work? And can I actually bring that living connection that I'm having into the moment that I'm meeting the other? Or to the task that I'm taking hold of? And that's actually such a gift that we give. It's this individualized gift that we give the world around us. The shadow forces, the double of the collective, is very strong. And this doubt and hatred and fear, if we feed it, if we build it, we actually build that in the collective atmosphere that makes it harder for each individual to step up right now. every little aspect that we can gain from our liberation, where we feel the truth and realities of the spiritual world as a direct inner experience, gives us strength. Whether you awaken to the realities of your spirit being, or whether you awaken to these realities of not the biodiversity, but the necessity of soul diversity, our interconnectedness, how it's so important that at this moment of my speaking, there's a certain quality of listening, because the thoughts that arise in this meeting arise because of us. And that's a living, liberating experience when it is known, not just thought in your screen thinking, but known as a living experience. Or whether you awaken to the realities of karmic laws and the various aspects of spiritual life that are spoken about and can be understood by the intellect. But if you can awaken those realities if they have access to your inner being, you have a different kind of potency and capacity to not just give yourself the strength and resilience in these times, but to really offer that strength and resilience to every aspect of your relationship to the world. So there are those forces that we should be mindful of. We have our own limiting shadow that becomes more conscious to us because the flame of the spirit is growing. And in this age where the consciousness we have around doubt, hatred and fear is growing, does not mean to say things are necessarily getting worse. It means that there must be something growing to allow this consciousness to reveal itself. Now, of course, there are a lot of people that act out of their shadow and have no awareness of it. And there are a lot of people being grabbed by fear of having no recognition of the times. But there are lots of experiences where people are waking up to the amount of fear, the amount of doubt, and the amount of hatred that is showing itself in our communities. And in that wakefulness, we can recognize some great flame must be growing. Let's not feed the doubt, the hatred and fear, but keep turning our attention to what is it that's growing. How can we build upon it? I think that's 15 minutes.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. Thank you.
Yeah, this thought that Lisa has just brought us, I think it's hard in my experience for people to come to the idea that as we get close to the flame, that we don't just immediately get to sit in bliss. I certainly remember that time in my life where I think I had a vision that's like, if you could break through and come closer to spirit, it will feel safe and warm and beautiful only. But that, I think, maybe a picture that could add to where I hear Lisa bringing us is that you could say is a childhood relationship to spirit. But freedom, I think, another way of looking at it is imagine that we are the children of the spiritual world, that they have been bringing us up within the womb of their beings. And because they believe in us, they're letting us leave home and to go out into the world so we can stand on our own 2 feet, which always means also facing the monsters. As if you look at all of the ancient cultures and their stories about the path to freedom, the ones who are truly free have to usually go inside the labyrinth to face the Minotaur. They have to cross the river Styx and face Cerberus or the dragon stories. And by being and becoming unafraid to die, you come across the final layer, the final border of freedom. And that's the mysterious, strange paradox that spirituality speaks about so often, and certainly in anthroposophy, that true life is on the other side of death. From the perspective of the spirit, things are usually flipped on their head. And that has to do, I think, with this element that Lisa brought up, is what are the forces that are actually inhibiting me from fulfilling that it is which I am here to do? And the last kind of frontier is death, fear of death. And fear of death expresses itself in all kinds of ways. For example, just public speaking. I don't think physical death is that scary to people anymore, but if you say you're going to stand up in front of a large room of people and try to speak out of your heart, the heart starts beating very fast, and there are very natural instincts which say, run the other way. And so our teachers often are showing us it is the free ones that are able, even in the face of death, to keep walking forward. And that's why so often it has been our brothers and sisters on this earth who have done things because they were true and good, and yet it cost their lives. You could say it's those souls who've done the most for all of us. Exactly like Lisa was saying, they actually, when you look spiritually, for example, at the life and death of Martin Luther King Jr., living with death threats to his family daily, and still not stopping the work. And you listen to him speak in his last speech. I've been to the mountaintop. I am not fearing any man. He broke through to that place where he could see there is something alive now in me over which death has no power. And this very strange thing that happens that Lisa spoke about, which is when one of us becomes free and keeps shining, when that flame really reaches its full maturity, it will have to be shining in utter darkness. It's like it ignites the fire in the souls of others. You know, I meet so many, certainly in my generation and younger, you know, the deep feeling of a conscience that is, we have to do everything we can to help the situation in the world. And usually that means, you know, we need to found NGOs and make organizations and do actions. And I think it doesn't necessarily dawn on someone that therefore I should inwardly liberate myself through personal development. But if you ask yourself, like, who have been the most influential human beings who have ever lived on the face of the earth, you usually find this element. I think a great example is really the Buddha. We don't even have a writing from the Buddha. Certainly we don't have any nonprofits. He just consequently and deeply walked a path that, and the individual processes that were completed in him never were only just about himself. They immediately had radiance into these other fields that we all are occupying. And what I think Lisa has tried to newly name with this screen consciousness, this object consciousness also, or you could say separation consciousness, that I'm here and you're there, gives us the impression, and this plays into the hand of the beings that do not want to see us fulfill our full potential. They give us the impression that this consciousness gives us the impression that I am powerless because I'm over here. What can I actually affect? What changes can I make? But if you imagine that every breath I'm taking is actually going into the breath body of the earth, which every single person is breathing, that gives us an outer picture of also inner realities. The soul cloud that is mine, my aura, is of course also a part of the atmospheric clouds of soul that surround the planet. And if our souls are full of fear, that's sending up fear forces actually into the spiritual atmosphere, which is nourishment for beings who will bring us things we will have to suffer through to overcome that fear. And so I'm coming back then to this picture of, it is a sign actually of the time of our spiritual maturity that we are coming into full responsibility, which is what freedom really is about. And that means we have to face those shadows. My shadow, our shadow, and the beings who oppose our full unfolding. So it's a very strange thing to say then from the spirit, if I heard Lisa right, and certainly that would be true from my perspective, it's a sign, it's a good sign. It's a sign actually that we are at the threshold of our freedom, that we are aware to such a degree and to such a strength of presence of the shadow. So to not lose heart, but actually right at that moment, know this time belongs to us. And I'm ready to die trying. That's all I can do. And in that moment, I awaken that free part in me again. So maybe I'll just add another part to complement at the end as if just last few thoughts. I think not only, of course, do I have work to do on myself, but I can have eventually a kind of experience that my liberation, my freedom is always born in relationship. And these thoughts that I heard Lisa describe, that I heard you describe, Lisa, of, you are worthless. If I can step back from them enough and start to just listen to them, then I can start to encounter that different voices approach my soul. One of the voices is you're worthless, you're a piece of junk, you have no agency in this world anyway, there's nothing you can do to help. Why even try? You're just going to fail again. Everything that basically wants to tell us we're not worth anything. There's another very, very compelling and interesting voice, which is, you're amazing. You are so special. You really actually already are divine. You don't have a shadow. So this conflation with our shadow on the one hand, and then this kind of actually, you are only flame. You are only a shining light. And those are, the more I can start to get familiar with these voices, they really are the voice of a being that is lying to me. So this is where this untruth, just to get back to that. And the gift for me of this, of the freedom of my earthbound consciousness, is to be able to hear all these different voices and choose. There's another voice. And that voice comes to me as I come near that voice, just like coming near the flame. Part of the nature of coming near the flame is it does cast a shadow. And I can turn and look behind me and see what my shadow. But I should know at that moment, the reason I can see a shadow is because I'm in the presence of the flame. And if I turn and look at this being who sees me truly, this being sees me, my shadow, and my potential. And from this being is streaming this kind of totally truthful, objective, but warm love, for lack of a better word. Or another way of saying is, I know I am immeasurably valuable in the eyes of this other. And there, for me, that's part of the secret of our freedom processes together. It's like, with what eyes am I seen? And with what eyes do I see? And if I look at my brothers and sisters with the eyes that see only the shadow, I'm also doing something to them. And if I look at someone in only admiration and wonder, and you're amazing, I'm not particularly helping them either. But true interest and a kind of sober warmth. And someone who sees the seed of the human being in me that is trying to unfold and comes towards me with understanding, compassion, and love. These are forces that, like the forces of the sun on the plants, actually draw out the forces that can lead me to freedom. They can't do the freedom event for me, but they have a kind of an effect like the sun on the plants. And when we've been looked at and seen with those eyes, it's nourishment towards the freedom process, the liberation process. So those are the few thoughts I wanted just to add. I'm so thankful for what Lisa brought us and how I could try to keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, Lakshmi, it's your turn.
Thank you for inviting me into this group. Can you hear me? I'm sorry about sorry about a little background noise. I have to have this unfortunate situation where I have to witness an old tree being brought down because I'm on the school grounds, which is having this experience of death and birth, because it's going to take us to possibility to have a new grounds for our high school. So it's also interesting for me that I get to listen to Lisa and listen to Patrick and their pictures, which took us to this threshold. And I want to bring a small part of my very unique experience. Like Lisa said, it's my own story. And like Patrick took us to this point where all these beings are all around me, but it is me who's choosing with whom I am going to work. Yeah, they're great pictures to carry. And for me to work, to grow up in a culture, in traditional South Indian culture, and to get trained as a mainstream medical doctor, and not only just medical doctor, to get trained intensely into mainstream neonatal intensive care. It's all about protocols. It's all about thoughts. It's all about that's something given to you. So this, what is given to me and how I relate to it, in which area I feel unfree, which area I'm comfortable, I accept it, there's freedom. So how I oriented to what was given to me by culture, by biographical tradition, by the country I chose to be born and be raised, and by the professional training I chose before I came as Lakshmi in this incarnation, was a very different freedom compared to how I need to stand here and experience what I chose, what's given to me by this life on earth, and experience and feeling what I have when I sit in front of every client, when I stand in front of a child with severe autism, and when I sit in a social group where it causes a lot of pain for me to experience lack of love between human beings. So here I need to make another choice. I am free here also. If I was free there in pre-birth life to choose this biographical situation, I am free now to choose which part of that I can accept, which part of it I can transform, which part of it I can digest and work with it, which part of it I excrete and reject. Okay, and here comes the question. So what's destiny? What is karma? What is freedom? Do I suddenly become unfree? Or am I here to find the freedom which I experienced before physical birth, before I had this physical body. How can I lose it into these physical sheets, into this earthly world, and re-find it through these physical sheets? So constantly, from birth to death, I'm living with this question of our choice of where do I want to be free, how long, when do I choose to wake up suddenly to this situation in my life and say, it worked for me till now, but no longer. I never felt unfree till this moment, but now I feel unfree with this person or with this situation or with this orientation or with this power. I don't feel free any longer. At this moment, I am free to step out of it or to step into something new. So the freedom for me is always there as long as my I activity take responsibility. So it's not what is given to me, it's what am I doing with it? Or what can I do with it through the sheets, through the physical sheets, through making my life work on earth, taking full responsibility, not only for my conscious spiritual life before I came here, but also full responsibility to my life on earth. I'm responsible for my life processes. I'm responsible how and what I do with my freedom and what impact it has on everyone around me. So this is very big and new to me because life did not give many opportunities to learn what it is to live with my freedom and what it is to live with the other's freedom. Because maybe I chose a life biographically in my first few years, 40 years. I was the princess and I was the queen and I was the neonatal intensive leader. So I think, and before I can order, the team responded. Almost like the whole team lived and breathed, and then like their whole existence is to sense what I want out of them and execute it. So it's very hard for me in that situation to understand, what do you feel? What do you think? Okay, I understood that they all chose to come under my loving authority, but it's huge responsibility to work out of your inner freedom and to help and to make sure and to take responsibility that everyone with you is also feeling that freedom. So was I conscious about it? No. How did I learn? The more I became sensitive to my experience of my unfreedom, and the more I became sensitive and empathetic towards the experience of unfreedom of the other in my presence. Fortunately, I had my brothers and many of my staff members and my partners who clearly told me how unfree they feel when they're with me. Yeah. So it's not only my inner freedom, it's also how I make you feel when I am working with you. So this is for me a double way of working. Am I just serving my freedom, or am I also responsible to see the impact of my free deed in the world? And does that interfere with others' freedom? So working with the children, especially working in Australia, in the Western society, with children after puberty and their definition of freedom, and is it healthy or is it unhealthy? Can human freedom in their thinking and willing action, deed, can that cause destruction to the self or to the environment? Do we call that freedom? So this is a big question I lived with the last 14 years in this country, working with high schools. So how do we educate our children in the first 14 years so that they can work with freedom, without self-destruction and without destruction of the environment or the society? Because everyone is good. Everyone feels that they're doing good. Everyone is thinking that they are children of God. Everyone is experiencing, and everyone is children of God. So where does the difference lie? Whether we are contributing to building a new world with love, with peace, with harmony, or a new world, like Lisa said, with lack of love, hatred, and no space for me to feel good about myself. I don't feel good about myself. I feel I have a doubt whether I can stand in the power of who I am, for who I came here to become. Can I make that space for me? Can I create that space? This is where I look into future, where education plays a major role. Human freedom needs education. To be human, we need reminders many times. Maybe that is not good enough if you want to be a human being and if you want to experience freedom of human being in your actions and in your thoughts. Does it come with responsibility? So this is what came to me when I was listening to Lisa and Patrick, powerful images, and also the question about the destiny and freedom. I felt like responding. I never ever felt unfree in my inner work with the spiritual world. Because if I enter my relationship, my inner dialogue with the spiritual beings, not standing in a space of freedom, then the dialogue is not possible. Because my experience with the hierarchies, with the spiritual worlds, and many human beings I met, including my father, who was my first teacher, was they invited me to stand in my freedom first and then start a dialogue. So this is my inner experience, which I want to share with you. Life, living dialogue with spiritual world, naturally, intrinsically comes with love and freedom. So if only we understand that, then we stand on a different ground. We don't stand on a ground where we say, excuse me, can I do this? Can I become myself? I always give the example of a kindergarten child. Our children in the world of kindergarten never stand at the door and ask the teacher, excuse me, can I come inside? Do you think it's time to come? They come in, okay, claiming the space. Okay, this is the kingdom. And they come in and they look at the teachers and then, what are you standing there and watching at me for? Are you not ready to serve me? Are you not here to serve me? I'm giving you this opportunity to serve me. World, the creation at my service. And this is my experience with the spiritual world. So we serve each other. We are devoted to each other. Because if I need spirit world to accompany me and to guide me, they need me to show how in time and in space, in my physical body, through physical body, how I come to experience of freedom. How through the barriers of this unfreedom, which comes with this physical earthly incarnation, this physical and etheric bodies, life on earth, how do I break through it? How can my spirit break through it and show them, here I am, but in a different picture. It's totally a different picture. And I become the co-creator. So the freedom for humanity is to actually imitate the creator, to show freedom in a totally different way. So I'm so glad many times in my life, I experienced unfreedom. I'm so glad that many times people who lived with me mirrored their experience of unfreedom with me. And I don't take it as personal responsibility, their experience, their feelings of unfreedom, but I do empathize with them. I do learn this lesson which Lisa and Patrick brought to us. I cannot do anything to free the other, but I can enter that feeling. I can accompany, I can be a witness. Sometimes I increase the feeling of unfreedom in the other in my presence to the extent they can't tolerate it any longer and run towards freedom. So in a way, I'm taking responsibility to be that loving authority, which my brothers wanted to run away from me, which my partners wanted to run away from me, which many of my nurses who worked for me ran away from me, and I love them. I love them at the moment when they wake up. Oh my God, you make me feel unfree. I'm running away from you. Off you go. Yeah? Till we meet again. We can tell this story differently when we meet again. So this is not my personal failure. This is my total conscious free choice to play that role. So am I contributing to somebody else's unfreedom? Yes, consciously. So this for me, I feel we can play this role to each other more and be more true to each other than being just nice. That's my experience of coming from an indigenous South Indian culture to a little bit more nicer Western culture. So I come across a little bit bang there, but I choose to do that and I take responsibility for it. Here lies my freedom. Stop here for because I'm really looking forward for interaction today. Immense gratitude for this space and opportunity.
Thank you, Lakshmi. It's so good to hear from you. And I'm just, again, so happy that the three of you are here together with all of us. So right now, I think, wow, I'm just digesting everything. And I've like all my notes written on the paper here. I think we can open it up with our time remaining. We actually have 15 minutes, a full 15 minutes remaining to open this up to questions. And we have a couple ways that you can do that. You can raise your hand, like not like this. I mean, you could do that and we'll scan and look for people, but there's a way to do that in the chat. You should be able to see that in the chat to raise your hand. And then you can unmute yourself or ask a question, or you can type your question into the chat. So thank you, all three of you, so much. And we'll just open it up. And Tess, you can help us figure that, monitor this too. Thank you so much. We can make it so people can unmute themselves too. That would be super.
Yeah, that's available. Yep.
And then they can chat with everyone now. Yep, everybody should be able to.
Yeah, you can put your question in the chat. Oh, Helena.
Okay, Helena. Yep. All right. So.
So it's not really a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's not really a question. It's just, this was so valuable for me for where I was at today. Everything that everyone said, Lisa and Patrick and you know, and Lakshmi as well, but I've been really feeling a task that I took on that I felt very inadequate in doing. I was feeling really not worthless, but having a lot of doubt. I was having a lot of doubt about it. So just the whole discussion, and what I realized was that whole doubt was stopping me from doing the task, which I felt was a very worthwhile task. It was stretching, this task was stretching me a lot into, you know, things that I was learning that I hadn't learned before. But just listening to everyone this afternoon has just really been just so helpful, because I can realize that doubt that I was having, I can turn it around and just look at it in a really different way from everything that was said. So I'm going to just keep going with that. But, you know, There's a verse of Steiner's, and I'm not going to remember the whole thing, but I really like the verse. And the last kind of part of it is, life grows more arduous for me. And I used to always get a little bit annoyed about that, but I also knew it was really true. So that feels like what's kind of happening here. So thank you so much. I feel enlivened, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena. I don't know if any of the three of you want to respond to that. That's the destiny verse. And we can, if it's not on the Padlet, we'll put it up there, but that life grows more arduous for me. Yes, so annoying and so true and good. Thanks for sharing. So Lisa, Patrick, or Lakshmi, you want to say anything about that? Otherwise, we can also just take more questions too.
Just thank you, Helena.
Okay, I'm going to read a question that's from Jolie, and Jolie is one of our chrysalis group. Oops, one of our chrysalis group leaders. Okay, so she's saying to Lakshmi, I'm a kindergarten teacher, so children walk in, giving me the opportunity to serve them. Am I consciously bringing unfreedom when I bring the class rhythm?
That's a great question. So am I consciously bringing unrhythm? No. The children come from a world and they're still deeply connected to the cosmic world, which is all about rhythm. I'm consciously bringing them, trying to bring the almost near similarity to home from where they're coming to us. I'm actually serving them with this understanding, with this memory of from where they are coming. Okay, so that one very powerful bridge between spirit world and earthly world is rhythm. Rhythm restores the power, this earthly life, which brings us back into connection of our spirit world is rhythm. In rhythm, actually you find freedom because rhythm has 2 beats. This happens now, and this does not happen for a long time, and it happens again. So in this not happening, human being feels free. So it's like music. A lot happens in the interval. So you need to hold the beats, and then in the interval is the life. So for me, freedom never happens unless you have those unfree moments. So kindergarten teachers are bringing this rhythm, which later in life, 7 to 14 years, comes with a little bit resistance from the child. Do I have to do it? If I don't want to do it, what you will do? Comes much later after 14. I don't want to do it. I want to go away from it. But by the time it's already inside the life. So you're creating a foundation for children in the first 14 years to have their own inner rhythm, inner voice, which keeps telling them, which keeps coming into this argument every time they want to go free. So the freedom is nothing to do with external world. We're talking about freedom in the inner life. Anthroposophy is talking about freedom in my inner life, in my thought life, in my intention life, in my deeds, in my actions from inside me. So kindergarten teachers, thank you everyone there. You're actually making the first layer of foundation of this amazing experience of being held, being cared for in rhythms. Little later, it continues to be held by primary teacher against the resistance so that it becomes conscious. In kindergarten, it was unconscious for the child. In primary, deeper, same rhythms continued, comes to conscious level, but still held against the resistance till they complete 14 years. And then comes a moment where I want to go away from it, but it is part of my life. So what am I doing? I'm freeing myself from my own life. Every step I take away from what I was experiencing in my first 14 years as a teenager in my freedom is that inner dialogue between my unfree part of me to my could be freed part of me. Beautifully, Patrick and Lisa both brought this picture of freedom and unfreedom. Is it outside or is it inside? The more we go inside, the better we can work. Then we don't have to blame anyone, political leaders, systems, education system, medical system. Yeah, time has come to take individual responsibility and no more blaming. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Yes, and thank you to the early childhood teachers. Okay, I just popped that verse in there. And Patrick or Lisa, did you want to respond to that at all, or I can go on to the next question? You can just go like this, and I'll just go. Okay, go on, you. Okay, here we go. So just a few people saying that it's been a tough day, and so that this was really valuable to hear the flame is there growing, that, you know, you have to, that I thought that was so helpful too. The awareness of the limitation means that there's something else there seeing it, and that's true for the community and the world too. Thank you. Okay, so here's a question. And this is a big question. Why are people born into the world physically imprisoned? Whether slavery, physically restricted, what is that karma? So I think there could be a lot of debate around this, but maybe a comment or two. And I have to say, this is from Carrie, asking why, I think is a big, just that first word there could be a challenge for us, but maybe you could, anybody want to take that up from their perspective?
I could be brief, and then maybe Lisa has more, or Lakshmi. You have to be wary and humble anytime you're going to answer a question like that, because it actually can only be answered for each individual case. That I think is just really important. You have to. We must continue to go forward to the idea that there are not general human beings, there are only real ones. And they have real biographies and real multiple biographies. And only in that perspective can we start to understand it. That being said, you could ask the same question: why would a soul be born into a severely handicapped body? It's a similar kind of question, in the sense that a person who is going to be in outer physical unfreedom, prison, or a body that is tremendously resistant to being able to fulfill your intentions, that's a being who has upped, you could say, if there is a weight room where freedom is being worked on, they have picked up some very large weights, because it is not, as Lakshmi said, my outer circumstances which determine my freedom. That's why I tried to get it. The freest person is the person who willingly dies, because we're all going to die. The freedom is not gained by not dying, by avoiding death, but how I die. And it's like the same thing, you know, whether, you know, you could call marriage prison. You could call any relationship a prison, because you're in it and you may not want to be in it. But finding your way to the free part of yourself in the limit. So the people like Nelson Mandela, his shining power comes from the fact that he was in prison. The way he was in prison shines into the earth. Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Lisa. Yeah.
I would, am I on? I'm on, yeah, hi, yeah. I would I would like to add another perspective, because you know, as a collective of as humanity, we've created constructs that reveal how far we've got to go. This isn't as good as it gets. We have a long way to go. And it can be an incredible sacrifice for the future for somebody to incarnate into a position to show the world how far we've got to go. And so sometimes we look at our experiences of how we're born into the world as karmic, as though that has a response to what was in the past. But we also should recognize there's this whole other way of understanding that what we can also do when we come into this world is bring a task which is far mightier than the individual's destiny. It wakes up humanity. And, you know, it's sometimes those people that appear perhaps to be placed in a role of lesser that are actually standing in a greater service to the evolution of the whole. We read it through a certain lens, but I just wanted to bring that other possibility. You know, working also with health, you know, people often read things through a particular way. You know, you have cancer, oh, that's because you didn't love your mother, or whatever, you know, these ideas of why this could be. And it doesn't really, it's actually, as Patrick rightly said, one has to really listen to what does it mean in that individual's life. And cancer, one doctor I worked with many years ago described this image of Buddha dying riddled with cancer. And this idea that even in the act of death, he tried to transform this sort of hardening materialistic process through his own being. And, you know, the rise of cancer can be looked at as, wow, this is really dodgy. You know, what are we doing? What are the chemicals we're putting out there? What is this, that there's such a rise? You know, I used to speak a lot about this when the World Health Organization said by 2010, 1 in 4 people will be affected by it. We're in 2020 and it's 1 in 2 people will be affected by it. On one hand, we could say, what is going wrong? On the other hand, we could say, yes, we can look at that. Yes, we can really work with that. But we can also say, how many people are willing with their very last breath to try and take materialism and shift it? And so I just think there are different ways to perceive the very same story. And you're absolutely right, we need to do that individually, but we also need to recognize that we have such a way of looking at the negative and saying it's bad, in saying, what is it telling us about the rise of something stronger, something more that's possible? And so if somebody is born to a life of restriction, it may have nothing to do with anything karmic in the sense that we often think of karmic, but more in the sense of we're ready to see that error and they're willing to serve humanity. And if we are willing to really listen to the task that someone carries, we will all make the adjustments, because it is an error that doesn't belong to the spiritual world. So why would they take that up? To show us that we live with a knowledge of the error of the human soul if people still come in enslaved.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so we are just at time now, and there's so much here to think about and take with us into these next few tense and interesting weeks in our country here in the United States, and of course for the world too. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Lisa and Patrick and Lakshmi. Thank you all so much. And we're so grateful to you for sharing this, especially at this moment in time in this very interesting 2020 year, for being here with us, and for all of you that are here with us and decided to join us on this journey through the year with Anthroposophy and applying it to daily life. So I think we just want to release you three and I know, Lisa, it's the middle of the night for you and very early for you, Lakshmi, and getting later for you, Patrick. So thank you, everybody. And I think, Tess, we can just unmute everyone, and they can say, everyone should be able to unmute themselves and just to say thank you and good night. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank you.